Hi, I am Jasmyne Flowers, writer, director, producer, content creator, podcaster. I have a film company called 10 Entertainment. I have a podcast called The Even Exchange, and I have a show called The Rated R Show. Going to the movies with my mom and my two sisters, and the feeling that I would get from going to a theater. Like, it's not just actually seeing the movie. It would be going in and like getting the ticket, going up and having them rip the ticket, and then smelling the popcorn, even though we knew we weren't getting any of that popcorn concession food, but just smelling it, and then going into a theater, walking up the steps, sitting in the seat that I wanted to sit in, and waiting for the previews to come on when the lights dimmed, and then seeing the movie. And even when I was a kid, I wasn't just looking at the movie, I was looking at the shots, I was looking at the actors, I was listening to the dialogue, and the feeling that I would get from that is the feeling that I wanted to inspire in other people. Not just children, but just people, period. And one day when I get there, I'm going to be sitting in the back of some theater that my movie is playing at, just looking at another, probably a kid, that's getting that same feeling from watching one of my films, hopefully. For a long time in my life, I dealt with not believing in myself. And I think this can resonate with a lot of people too. I think one of the things that we forget while we're looking at other creatives is we see and try to match their creativity, if you will. Try to make sure that we kind of go off of their brand, and we forget what made them so important was individuality. And so with me, I just want to keep in mind all the time, be an individual, be innovative, be creative. Someone is going to vibe with what you're doing. And even if they don't, believing in myself has taken me to the point now where I have created a podcast, The Even Exchange, created a show, The Rated R Show, in the midst of creating a web series right now that it's all me. It's all things that I've done to put out my own creativity. And personal brand is speaking of myself. And that's it. So my podcast, The Even Exchange, I started it. This is actually our third year with the podcast. And I have to be honest, the podcast started out with, it started because of a trash relationship, honestly. And it was a way for me to be heard. It was a way for me to get out all the things that I wanted to get out before. And then once the podcast kept going, I realized that I wasn't even mad at my ex, I was mad at myself. So then the podcast turned into being accountable, deciding how you're going to show up in the world. So I do the podcast, The Even Exchange, with two other women. Deidra, we call her Danny Thrasher, and Felicia Fee Gibson. And we sat down as women who wanted to talk about, like I said before, being accountable. We wanted to talk about the dating environment. We wanted to make it something where every Monday on Facebook Live, we have our show. We bring people to come in and talk to us about whatever they want to talk about. It's lighthearted and fun. And then my other show is called The Rated R Show. And I do that with my very good friend Lawrence. Lawrence Young is his name. And you would think he and I have known each other for years. And we have known of each other, but we've only been friends for the last 2 years. He's someone who, we have a relationship built on reciprocity, where he brings me to the front of the congregation a lot of times, where he's like, Jazz, that's not right. And he also tells me what he thinks about my fashion choices, and I tell him about his. And it's just something where we get online, and it's a little bit more of a politically driven show, but we talk about things that are important to us. We are both a part of the LGBTQIA community. He's a gay man, I'm a bisexual woman, and we really want to bring in stories that people don't really understand or notice, or even when it comes to Black people, how the LGBTQIA community feels left out in some of the stories of being Black. So that's a little bit of how we bring that content to the front as content creators, to decide that this is something that we want to talk about. So those are my two shows that I do. What I really love about all of these platforms is that you don't have to wait for a bigger company to see the value in your voices. You can really decide. Like when I first started my podcast, I didn't know how to record audio. I just said I was going to do it. I heard a podcast. I did a quick Google search about how to do a podcast. I have a Mac. Why not? Let's sit down and talk about it. And along the way, I figured out things along the way. And this is one of the reasons why I tell people, you want to be a creative, just get started. Nobody's first project is ever going to be as good. I feel like I have so much creative control over what I want to put out, what I want to say, and I don't have to be held down to what other people want me to say or someone else's opinion about what I should be saying or what I should be doing. It's all my own and I control it. And that makes me happy as a content creator. Truthfully, it's still growing. It's still a process because when you first start out, nobody knows you. The industry is oversaturated with people who are doing the exact same thing that I'm doing. So the question is, why would people want to listen to me? And to actually keep going as a creative, and you're like, where's the audience? Why aren't people listening to me? It has to be a personal drive to keep going. And that's honestly, within the third year of doing the Even Exchange, that's what we're still doing. We actually, we've just hired a company to help us with our visuals so that we can look better, so that hopefully we can gain more engagers, more followers. And at some point, I always call myself a non-influencer, but at some point the goal is to become an influencer. So again, truthfully, that's something that we're still working at. But I will say, like, the very first show is always the most exciting show because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how many people are actually going to be listening to you. You don't know, like, will my family and my friends pay attention? And this is one thing I will give to people, a little gem. I remember when I first started, and some of the people that I thought who were going to support me were not as supportive as I thought that they were going to be. And that's a little bit like, what do you mean you're not going to listen to my show? But I had a friend who set me down and she was like, listen, knock it off. It is not going to be your family and friends that listen to you. It's going to be complete strangers who don't know anything about you, who will engage with your brand. So if you're looking for your family and friends to support you, stop it. And from that conversation on, I never focus on the people who were closest to me because it's just how some people's brain works sometimes. So I started really focusing on people who didn't know me, people who I had to, I guess in a sense, win over. Or just, if you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't. That's kind of the way that I go with this. So I'm interested in whoever wants to listen to what I have to listen to, also understanding that there's a lot of other people doing what I do, but nobody does what I do. Film has been the love of my life and my heartbreak too, seriously, at the same time. I think technically I started in film about 12, 13 years ago. Started out, I'll never forget it. The very first video I worked on was a music video by Jagged Edge called Stunners. That was back in 2006, so 13 years ago. And I was an intern on that film, and it was 19 hours. I was not supposed to get paid, but I stayed the entire time. And the producer actually gave me a little bit of money because she didn't think I would stay. And from then on, I started working in film, working at doing more things. And then I took a break from film because I felt like I didn't have the personality to do it. I was really quiet, really shy, just didn't really know my place. And then I told myself, if you're going to be in this industry, you have to learn how to speak up for yourself. And so I took a minute, I took a break, and I came back in. And that's when I started my company, 10-4 Entertainment, where we did music interviews for underground artists to give them better visuals so that they could distribute their art. Nikki and I did work together. Nikki is actually a really good friend of mine. She's living in LA right now, living her dreams. And the film that we did together was awesome. It was amazing. And as of right now, I think she just scored about $50,000 to do her film. So she's pretty awesome. And right now I'm working with a young lady named Net Snacks for, she's a writer for a web series that I am about to get ready to come out with later on this year. So I'm taking what I want to do to another level as far as being doing film, shorts, and all of those things that have to do with films. Actually, I think it's important for everybody's voices to be heard. But again, it goes back to individuality. I think everybody has something to say. But I think it's important for my voice to be heard because I really have to think about it. I think that I really want to have my own footing in the world when it comes to the way that women are seen and the way that Black people who identify as LGBTQIA are seen. To me, representation is so incredibly important. When we talk about women, Black women, and the way that we're seen in the world, and the fact that I think for a long time, other people's voices of authority have been put onto us. And I just think it's time for us to be able to have our own voices of authority. And again, to speak to the LGBTQIA community, I see a lot of stories that, like I said again, with Black people, where we are left out of the narrative. So for me, I want my voice to be heard as a Black woman who identifies as bisexual in this Black space, so I can say we are here as well, and we will not be looked over for anything. If one of us isn't free, none of us are free, as the saying goes. So I think my voice will be heard, and I think it's important for my voice to be heard, and I think I'm pretty much, I'm going to make my voice heard, pretty much. A lot of my education is coming from looking at stories even more like how I did as a child, looking at films and like even if it's a film that I love, reading someone's script and looking at how that script, how it's dissected in that script, and how someone decided to tell that story from the words that are written on a page to how it's actually executed on a film. So that's how I think my education goes into play. I want to actually see it. I guess, what is fear? And what is fear, and what? If you are afraid to do this, then maybe you shouldn't be doing it. And I will say this too. Like I said earlier, I had to sit myself down for a minute from film, because there was a point in time where I was fearful of it. But I did take a break and I sat myself down and said, you need to change your personality in order to be in this industry. It is cutthroat. And nobody owes you anything. And you aren't entitled to anything just because you thought you created a great story. You have to get in there. You have to go to whatever length that you have to go to make your voice heard, to have people see your creativity. And I just want to tell anybody who's fearful of it, stop the fear right now. It's crippling. It does nothing for anybody. You'll be that 50, 60-year-old person that's saying, I shoulda, woulda, coulda. Don't do that. Create now. And truthfully, like I said before, your first project probably won't even be your best one, but you will learn from it. And your second one will be great, then the third, then the fourth, and the fifth, and so on and so forth, until you get to the point of almost mastering your craft.